So we begin. It is Parshas Kairach this week. And Kairach, unfortunately, successfully seduces the entire nation of Yidden. Rashi says he was mafata kulam. He seduced everybody in his rebellion against Holy Moshe Rabbeinu. There was a Chassidic Rebbe, one of the early Chassidic Rebbes, who said that he remembers his previous Gilgulim. There were a number of them that claimed that. Yeah. And one of them said he remembers when he was in the desert, and he remembers that it was very unclear who was right, Moshe or Kairach. Actually, there's Ramban. When Kairach said his taina, Moshe is the one answering back. Aaron never says anything. And the Ramban say, other Mefarshim say that Aaron agreed. Aaron told Kairach, "You're right. I'm not the best suited for the job. You Taka are more suited." Kairach, exactly. In other words, Moshe took up Aaron's cause.
Aaron's supposed to take his own cause up. It's humble. He got humility.
Yeah, but he didn't have to agree. He didn't have to agree. Yeah, he didn't have to agree. He agreed. It's just one paper. He agreed. The fact that Aaron agreed, was something remarkable. Remarkable. You know, the Rebbe Rashab once commented about the Baal Shem Tov's son, Reb Tzvi, when the Baal Shem Tov passed away on Shavuos in 1760, so the mantle of leadership automatically passed on to his son. He had one son and one daughter. His son name was Reb Tzvi, and Reb Tzvi was the Rebbe for a year, exactly a year. The next Shavuos on the yard site, Reb Tzvi says, my father came to me, and he told me, he says, "Do a bear in Val." There's a bear in the forest, referring to the Maggid. His name was Doi Bear, and that the Shechina with its entire retinue has moved over to the Maggid, and the Tzvi took off his surtuk, the Bekisha, the Rebbe clothing that he wore. He gave it to the Maggid. The Maggid didn't wait a moment. He went to the head of the table and he started saying Chassidus. So the Rebbe Rashab commented that there's a Gemara in the end of Masechta Menachos where it says about it. Mazel tov Chassan, Mazel tov. Where the Gemara quotes someone who said that before I became a leader, I would never have done it. But once I was in that position, I would never give it up. And the Rebbe Rashab said, for Reb Tzvi to say, listen, who am I shouldn't be Rebbe is one thing. But once he was Rebbe for a year, to give it up and become a nobody, become just, another part of the crowd, that was sensational. The Rebbe Rashab said, that's something very unique. We know very little of him. What happened to the Tzvi after that? Some say he became a tzaddik nister. Shem Tov. His father's. Yeah, I know. I don't. I never came across the last name of the Baal Shem Tov or his son. His son-in-law Yechiel Michal was known as the Deitschel. He came from Germany, the Deitsch. So he had a last name. But by the Friedrich Rebbe in one place says that when the Alter Rebbe was counting those that taught him his greatest teachers of Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe mentioned Yechiel Michal, the Baal Shem Tov's son-in-law. The Friedrich Rebbe writes in one place, and everyone wonders, what's Friedrich Rebbe talking about? We have no other source that the Alter Rebbe learned from him. But in one place, the Friedrich Rebbe quotes the Alter Rebbe saying, Adol's husband, yeah. Anyhow, fine. So also the word is Aaron was already Kohen Gadol, right? And the fact that he was able to say even afterwards, I'm not worthy, even already post facto, that's already something very unique, Even if he didn't want to fight against Aaron to Kairach, but to agree with him, fascinating. Anyhow, Aaron was remarkable. He said, "V'nachnu ma." Moshe and Aaron said about each other, "What are we?" Right? And the famous difference between Avraham, David, and Moshe and Aaron. Avraham said, "I'm offer." In Vayera, he tells the Eibishter, "I'm offer ve'efer. I'm dust and I'm ash," which is nothing but something. David HaMelech says, "Anochi soilas." I'm a worm, v'lo ish. A worm is nothing, but it's something. But Aaron and Moshe said, "V'nachnu ma." What are we? Nothing. Nothing at all. Emes. Emes is Rosh Tevis. The Aleph is the Efer that Avram said. The Mem is the Ma that Moshe and Aaron said. And the Tov is Tolas that David said. To teach you that truth and humility go together. When someone is humble, they'll find the truth. Truth demands humility, etc. So Emes is Rosh Tevis, the three levels of humility. But Aaron and Moshe's level was supreme. It reigned supreme. And you mama see that in the story. Okay, now we go to number 1. It's a Gemara in Moed Katan, Daf Tes Zayin. And it's an interesting Gemara. The Gemara there, randomly, the Gemara is talking about laws of Cherem, when you put someone in Cherem, in Nidui. And it goes kind of off topic, kind of on topic, to the laws of summoning somebody to Beis. Because if one is summoned to court and refuses to come to Beis, as we know, they can be put into Cherem. As if you ever open up the back of the Jewish press, they still make the Jewish press? They do. You have a list of Siruvei Din, those that refuse to come to court. Some of them are since the 1900s, the 1980s, 1990s, Siruv Din. You wonder how effective it is. Reb Moshe Feinstein was once asked if you're allowed to take the Jewish press into the bathroom. He said, Faked, you should ask him if you're allowed to take it out of the bathroom. I saw, that's what whatever.
Small button has a column. What do we do with that?
There's thread tears in there. Nah, I don't believe that.
It's its own
I heard it from the Rosh Yeshiva next door.
Yes.
Fine.
Likewise.
Listen, I don't know. I wasn't there. But either way,
Where's the
we
source?
sort of Moshe's patient, but when he has to be sharp, he can be sharp. We've seen in the Shiurim. Anyhow,
You can make a joke.
We've also seen that there
So-
are things attributed to him. That
exactly, yeah. So if things that officially are written in his name weren't written by him, imagine
How much more
hearsay.
so somebody
How much
saying
more so
the
hearsay?
story.
You can't trust anything. Fine. Either way, it's an unfortunate reality that often Bezdin calls people and they don't come. And of course, there's excuses and defenses. There's always justifications. There's always two sides to a story. And it really boils down to the lack of strength that Botei Dinim have these days, In days gone by, you could either you search as a historian or you're learning through the eyes of halacha. But when you see what happened hundreds of years ago, the Yidden were in Poland, and before that, when the Yidden were in Spain, the Rabbanim really had great and mighty authority. And today that's not the case. And it reflects itself in the fact that the Bezdin can say, come, and the guy's like, another day, not today, I'm busy.
Same thing for the U.S. Congress.
All authority is being diminished. It's a world of efkedus now, right?
Exactly.
Whatever anyone says goes, and that's it. There's no authority, there's no... Okay, all right. Number 1, Gemara Moed Katan, it's on 16a, Tezayin Amar Aleph. Amar Rav Minalon, how do we know the Meshadrin Shlichut de Beidinah? How do we know that we send a messenger from the Bezdin, Umezamninon le Ledina, and we invite the defendant, right? L'chayim lay, it refers to the defendant Ledina. In other words, you have the toveya, the plaintiff who approaches Bezdin and says, I have a claim against Yankel, and Bezdin will send a messenger to knock on Yankel's door. Today they'll send him in the post, maybe they'll even send him an email. There doesn't have to be a real shliach. The point is just to get the information across, to tell Yankel you're being summoned to court. Now the Gemara says, how do we know that we do this? Now that's a very strange question, because what's the other option? What do you mean, how do you know? What's the other option? That the defendant on his own should just have a dream that Bezdin is summoning him? I mean, of course he has to be notified. So the Rishonim debate. Some Rishonim learned that the pshat is, you would have thought that Bezdin themselves have to knock on the guy's door. You would have thought maybe Bezdin themselves have to knock on the defendant's door to tell him to come. And if they only send a messenger, the defendant doesn't have to open the door. He can slam the door on the guy and say, the court wants me, let them come. You may have thought that. And we're going to learn that no, Beis Din can suffice with sending just a messenger. That's how most Rishonim learn. The Ritva learns, what we would have thought is, if the plaintiff tells you I'm summoning to court, you have to go. And the Gemara teaches us no, only when you hear from Beis Din, not if you hear from the Teveya. So there's two paths in the Rishonim of what we would have thought you would have done. But either way, says the Gemara, what's taka the source that Beis Din can send the shliach? The shliach knocks on the door, and then you have to go. The chsiv in this week's parsha, Vayishlach Moshe, Moshe sent Likroi to call the Dasan ula Aviram, to Dasan and Aviram, Bnei Eliyav, the sons of Eliyav. As we know, Dasan and Aviram have a long-standing vendetta against Moshe Rabbeinu. Some explain that their issue was, they said, Moshe, who are you? You didn't suffer with us in Mitzrayim. You weren't there. And also, for 80 years you're gone. Okay, you grew up in the palace of Parish Gayach, then you leave town, you go to Ethiopia, go to Cush, you go to Midian, and now you come back and you say you're the Redeemer. You didn't taste servitude like we did. They felt he was the chutzpah that he has. Now he's going to be the leader. He didn't go through what we went through. It's interesting, Dasan Vaviram, when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, Dasan Vaviram stayed with Pari because they thought the Yidden were only going for 3 days, as Moshe had clearly told Pari. Dasan Vaviram said, oh, you're here for 3 days, such a tirchazah shlep, we're not going. And they stayed. And it was only after 3 days passed and it became apparent that the Yidden are not making a 180, Dasan Vaviram said, we're out of here. And they came to the Yam Suf, they missed Kriyas Yam Suf. But the Eibishter made a special Kriyas Yam Suf for them. That's why in Bishalach it says twice, there were two different splitings of the sea. One was specifically for them. And you wonder why would the Eibishter do such miracles for them? So the Maharil Diskin explains that actually Dasan Vaviram were part of a group of people known as the Shaitrim. When the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, there were Egyptian taskmasters, underneath which were Shaitrim, Yiddish officers, underneath whom were groups of Yiddish workers. And if the Yiddish workers didn't come up with the requisite amount of bricks, it was their Shaitrim, the officers, that were responsible. And they could have whipped the Jewish subjects underneath them to come up with the requisite total, but they didn't. Vayuku Shaitri, so they took the pain on their shoulders, as Rashi tells us in Parshas Shmos. Well, Dasan and Vaviram were part of this group. And in other words, they had tremendous Avos Yisrael. They were really good people. And they suffered big time, so other Yidden shouldn't suffer. And that's part of the reason they looked at Moshe and said, Moshe, who are you? You never suffered for the Yidden. You were busy waging wars in Cush, living it up in Midian. Okay, Moshe was thrown in the pit for 10 years, but maybe they didn't know about that. Anyhow, but because Dasan Vaviram had that special schus, the Eibishter made a unique kriyas. Anyhow, the Rebbe once said that Dasan Vaviram were große Menschen. And of course, the Arizal, the Rebbe says, is einen gewen große Menschen. Dasan were große Menschen, sure. That's why Moshe tried so hard to make peace with them in this week's parsha. Moshe continues, he tries and tries. The Arizal tells us that they came back in Gilgulim. Dasan came back as Doyeg, Aviram came back as Achitophel, who were also incredible minds, geniuses, and just like Dasan Vaviram had a beef with Moshe, well, Doyeg and Achitophel had beef with David HaMelech. But either way, let's go back to the story here. Moshe sends a messenger to call Dasan Vaviram. What does that teach you? Moshe is sending a shliach to call Dasan Vaviram to come, a summons. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu sounds to be like the court, and he is sending a messenger to call Dasan Vaviram. So it's black and white. You see, Beis Din sends a shliach to summon the people to a court case. Okay. The Gemara continues, Uminalon, and how do we know that you could summon them to a din? Which is the strangest question. The Gemara just said, we just proved from a pasuk that the Beis Din can send a messenger and summon the litigants to din. And the Gemara now asks, how do you know that you summon them to a court case? What does the Gemara mean over here? The Meiri learns You may have thought that the Dayanim have to go to was.
Why is the Gemara asking that?
Who's the Gemara Moed Katan? So the Meiri learns the Gemara Shaila is maybe the Dayanim have to go to the house of the litigants. Who said they could summon them to the place of the court? Dichsiv. So for that we have another pasuk in this week's parasha. Vayomer Moshe al Kairach. Moshe tells Kairach, Ato v'chol adoska, you and all of your nation have to come tomorrow. Moshe sets a time. He sets a place before God, and you're going to have the Keteris contest. So the Meiri learns from here. You learn that the Beis Din has the right not just to arrange a court case, but the place. They can tell the litigants where to go. Says the Gemara, L'kamei gavra rabba, which means that when the Beis Din is summoning somebody, they're supposed to use the name of the greatest person in the court. Because Moshe is part of the court, but he tells Kairach, Lifnei Hashem, stand before God. That shows you that since Moshe and Hashem made up this Beis Din, Moshe uses the name of God. You're supposed to use the name of the most prominent of the judges. And then the Gemara says, how do you know you say Ato Planya? How do you know that you reveal to the defendant who the plaintiff is? Dichsiv, because what did Moshe tell Kairach? You're coming, Haim va'aron. Moshe told Kairach exactly who he's standing against. And then it says, how do I know the Kavin on Zimna that you could choose a time? We said you can choose a place. What about a time? Because Moshe said Mocher tomorrow. So you see all of these halachas of how you summon someone to court is learned from the interaction of Moshe with Nadav, with Dasan and Aviram, and with Kairach. So that's the reading of the Gemara. I will tell you that if you look in number 2, the Nemuke Yosef, one of the last of the Rishonim, Rabbi Yosef Chaviva, the Chazanish says, he just managed to be in the times of the Rishonim, because he passes away in the 1420s. But he is the commentary on the Rif in Masechta Moed Katan. Zok the Nemuke Yosef, the Kosav Harai, we're number 2. The Ravid says, different than the way we explained. We said that Moshe and the Eibishter are the court. And Moshe sent a messenger to go to Dasan Vaviram. The Ravid says no, Moshe was the Shliach of Beis Din. Moshe is not the court, God is the court. Moshe was the messenger of the Eibishter. Sharihu Shlucha Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's the Shliach of God. Ulefanav, and before Hashem and Ziman Oisam Ladin, Moshe summoned them to Din. So the Ravid offers one pshat that Moshe in fact was the messenger. The pasuk says though, Vayishlach Moshe, Moshe sent to call Dasan Vaviram. It sounds like Moshe was the one sending. So it's a bit strange to learn this way, but either way, the Ravid isn't done yet. The Ravid himself says, V'yesh lefarish, Moshe was the Beis Din with Hashem. The first way we explained, which is the way most Rishonim learn, that Moshe is part of the court. V'shalach la'adas Kairach, and Moshe sent a messenger. You know who he sent? Al Yad Kairach. Kairach was the messenger to call to Dasan Vaviram. So if you go back to number 1 on the 3rd line, we're teaching the pasuk. Moshe sent Kairach to call Dasan Vaviram to summon them to court. That's what the Ravid is saying. Back to number 2 in the 4th line. V'shalach la'adas Kairach. He sent to Kairach al Yad Kairach, through Kairach. Sheyiyu muzumanim l'din, they should be summoned to court l'machar, the next day in front of God. Now the Ravid says, but what are we learning from this pasuk? V'loy halach Moshe lahazminan, that the Beis Din themselves don't have to knock on the defendant's door. Al ma'isi ein srichin hadayanim l'zalzel ba'atzman. The dayanim don't have to belittle themselves to go knock on the guy's door. V'loleches eitzel ha'balei, to go to the litigants la'azminan l'din, to invite them, to summon them. No, sha'balei din chayav mizdaman al pi shlucham. The balei din can be summoned through a messenger of Beis Din. Fine. And then he said, V'im yesh behem mumcha, if the court has an individual who's the greatest of the judges, tzrichin heim lachlek lekovet, so then the other 2 judges, let's say it's a Beis Din of 3, the other 2 should give honor to the 3rd, to the prime judge, ula'azminon b'shem ha'mumcha, and to summon the litigants in the name of the chief judge, as it says, Hayu lifnei Hashem v'lo yomer hayu lefanenu. Moshe didn't say, tomorrow you're summoned to us, he said the Eibishter. So the Ravid is giving 2 ways of understanding the story. One way is that Moshe was the Shliach of the Eibishter. The second way is that Moshe was himself part of the court. Him and Hashem was a two-person court. There's actually a machlokes in Masechta Sanhedrin between the Amoraim. Shmuel, Rava, many Amoraim debate if two people can paskin a din Torah. Well, according to the Ravid, you have over here the Eibishter and Moshe, two individuals that are going to paskin. Anyhow, the Ran, if you look in the Ran's Chidushim and he also brings both options. Was Moshe the messenger, or was Moshe part of courts? Fine. But Al Kaponim, the Gemara learned a couple dinim. Number one is that Beis Din sends an agent. What would you have thought otherwise? Well, we saw in number two that Ravid says very clearly. You would have thought the Beis Din themselves have to knock on the door of the defendant. The Gemara is teaching you a chiddush, a novelty. No, they can send a shliach. But I mentioned there's another way of learning, which is the ritva. I didn't manage to get the ritva on the paper, but the ritva learns that you would have thought that maybe the toiveya himself, the plaintiff himself, has the right to summon the defendant. And the Gemara's chiddush is no. Until the defendant hears in the name of the court, he doesn't have to leave his house. So the ritva and the Ravid have a debate of what the novelty of the Gemara is, like I mentioned 10 minutes ago when we started. Either you would have thought the messenger doesn't suffice, you have to hear from the Dayanim, like the Ravid, or the Ritva says you would have thought if the plaintiff knocks on your door, you have the obligation to go to court, and the Chiddush is no, not until you hear from Beis Din. Fine.
In America, they have something called citizen's arrest, which would be that one guy.
Someone owes you money, you can do a citizen's arrest?
No, you can pull somebody over and say, it's not
Depends on the
a practicing law. But
No,
it's
so
really
if
called-
somebody's in the middle of a robbery, if someone's in the middle of a theft, you can do that. Not if someone owes you money. Although some Rishonim hold that if someone owes you cash and doesn't pay, they're over loy signiv. We had the shir last Sunday about throwing people into jail. Exactly. And we saw that many poskim say that if someone refuses to pay and has the cash, we'll throw him into prison. But only Beis Din can throw him into prison. Not that we saw very clearly. We saw very clearly that from the Rivash
Do you think
that
Moshe is sending Korach because Korach is actually the most powerful leader?
he was leading the rebellion.
No, but I'm saying he's sending him because of the influence he has to make sure that they show up.
Is he-
Wasn't
right,
he the one
right,
being
right,
called,
right.
though?
From
Well,
the
that's
tactical
what the
side.
Ravid says, that he was the. There were two things. Moshe sent twice. He sent Korach to call Dasan Vaviram, but there's two psukim. You look in the second pasuk, Moshe summoned Korach. There's two things. He used Korach to summon everybody, and then then he had to. He thought maybe he'd have to get Korach on his team. It didn't work, so he had to summon Korach himself. Fine. But here's the thing: the Gemara number one learned a couple halachas. A, that Beis Din sends a messenger. But in the Gemara also mentioned that Beis Din has to notify the defendant who the plaintiff is. It sounds from the Gemara that if Beis Din doesn't tell the defendant who the plaintiff is, the defendant doesn't have to come. Until you tell me who I'm up against, I'm not coming. Beis Din from the outset has to reveal, they have to disclose the information. And that's...
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's a clear Gemara. No one argues on that. From the fact that Moshe told Korach, you're coming up against Aaron. Moshe made it very clear who the plaintiff was. But now we come to the following debate. Okay, you have to tell the defendant who the plaintiff is. Does the defendant have the right to know what the case is about? Does the defendant have to does he have the right to demand the knowledge of why am I being summoned? Or Beis Din says, no, you'll find that in court.
Yes, you got to prepare.
You gotta
gotta
prepare.
know who it is.
He's saying it's almost not fair if the plaintiff has been busy preparing for months. It's not fair that he should be be a couple steps ahead of the defendant. However, it's not so pashut, and we're going to see it's a major debate, and it's a debate between the Be'er Sheva and the Shach. The Shach in number 3. It's a Shach in Choshen Mishpat Siman Yud Aleph, and he is tackling the Be'er Sheva. Yisachar Ber Eilenberg was his name. He's born in the middle of the 1500s, so he's one of the early Achreinim. He was a student of the Levush, of Mordechai Yaffa, the great Rav of Lublin, and the Be'er Sheva was a great halachist, and he's also a Kabbalist. He spent a bit of time in Italy, and he learned under the Yisrael Sarug, who was one of the great students of the Arizal. The Yisrael Sarug learned under the Arizal before the Chaim Vital did. Because when the Arizal first came to Tzfas, the Arizal went to Tzfas to learn with Chaim Vital. The Arizal before then had been in Egypt, and he had a dream, and someone came to him from the yeshiva of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in heaven, and said, you have to go to Tzfas and teach Rabbi Chaim Vital. He went to Tzfas, Chaim Vital wasn't there, he was in Damascus. And Chaim Vital starts having dreams that someone's here to teach you Kabbalah in Tzfas. It took Chaim Vital a couple months till he came. During those couple months, the Arizal taught Rabbi Yisrael Sarug. Yisrael Sarug apparently left Tzfas before the Chaim Vital came. Yisrael Sarug then traveled around Poland to teach the teachings of the Arizal. He made it to Italy, and it's famous he taught Kabbalah to Menachem Azariah of Panu, the Rameh of Panu. But Yisrael Sarug also taught Kabbalah to this Yisachar Ber Eilenberg, known as the Be'er Sheva. The Be'er Sheva. The Be'er Sheva also wrote a very important commentary on Rashi on Chumash called Tzei de L'Derech, which the Rebbe always quotes, a beautiful commentary on Rashi. And so the Be'er Sheva was also had a big hand in Kabbalah. And when he was in Italy, he had a student by the name of Azariah Figo or Fijo or Ficho or something like that. He's more famous by his Sfarim. Azariah Figo is famous for his sefer Bino Le'itim, beautiful droshes. And in Nigla he wrote a sefer called Gidulei Truma on monetary laws, on Choshen Mishpat. And he was a famous rabbi in Italy, Azariah Figo or Fijo, and he was a student of this Be'er Sheva. Now the Be'er Sheva has a letter to his student, the Azariah Fijo, the Gidulei Truma, and in it the Be'er Sheva says the following. The Be'er Sheva says if it ever happens that Reuven summons Shimon to court, and Shimon gets the message from the Beis Din, Shimon has the right to know who's summoning him, but he does not have the right to demand the knowledge of what it's about. Beis Din for ois from the outset has to tell Shimon Reuven's calling you. They don't tell Shimon what the topic is, and even after Shimon demands, he doesn't have the right to find out. Because Fakert, Beis Din wants to see exactly what his natural reaction is going to be on the spot. It's critical. It's not fair that Teveya has a couple months ahead. He has rayas to his psak, and let's read number 3. No, but the hotel Beis Din, the hotel Beis Din. Yeah. In other words, once he's in front of Beis Din, sees what happens. Does his face, how high did his eyebrows being raised? What color is his face turning? Is he getting nervous? Is he astonished? Beis Din can judge so much based on that initial reaction. It's worth its weight in gold. And it as much as it could be to his detriment, it could be to his benefit.
Does he have the right?
Because if it's mamish pure astonishment, that could work to his favor. One.
So it's a precursor to what's happening today. It's a preliminary plea, and then he has the right to make a defense.
But that's always, Beis Din doesn't judge on the spot. You always, if a guy says, I have rayas, give me some time, we give him time. The certain amount of time we give him, and then, if we see that he's just delaying, then, we take the necessary measures. Okay, number 3. So he's quoting the Be'er Sheva. Pasak, we're number 3, third word. Pasak, the Be'er Sheva Paskins. And again, it's interesting, it's in a tshuva that he wrote to his student, Rabbi Azariah Fijo, the Gedulei Truma, who was one of the great poskim in the early 1600s, especially in Italy. His mamish big stuff. The Shach quotes his sefer Gedulei Truma all the time. And that he was the recipient of this letter from his teacher, the Be'er Sheva. So the Be'er Sheva says like this: Pasaki paskins beruven shetavei l'Shimon. Reuven summons Shimon sheyivrar imay dayanim. That means we'll select a Beis Din together. You choose one, I choose one, and then the rabbis will choose a third. Fine. The Shimon meishiv. Shimon says no. Shimon says what? Loy ekonis ledinimcha. I am not coming. Im loy tagid li mitchil amashetitz lodonimi. Until you tell me what this is about, I ain't going. Reuven ain't roitze legalas loy oifen tviyasa klal, but Reuven doesn't want to reveal it. Says the Be'er Sheva Hadinim Reuven. Reuven doesn't have to reveal nothing. Mahu dar minon per cheskes abatim. So he brings a raya for Gemara and Baba Basra. Daf Lamed Aleph. The Gemara there is talking about cases where people are disputing over real estate. You have Shimon, who's been in the house for a couple of years. Reuven is the previous known owner. He's been out of town for a long time. Reuven returns and says, "Oh, what's this guy doing in my house?" Right? And Shimon could have many claims. Shimon could say, first of all, it's never yours. Shimon could say, I bought it from you. Shimon could say, you gave it to me as a gift. Shimon has many tinies that he could say. Before they come to court, Shimon says ABC. And everyone knows, they come into court, and all of a sudden Shimon pulls out XYZ. He goes a completely different path. And Reuven's like, what, this guy? He tells Beis, this guy is untrustworthy. Everyone knows for the last couple of weeks before the court, before we had the Din Torah, he was saying, I don't know, he was saying ABC, and now he's saying an opposite claim, the guy's untrustworthy. And the Gemara says very clearly, no. Shimon has the right to say whatever he wants out of court and save the real stuff until he stands in front of Beis Din. Yeah. And the Gemara, Ovid inish deloy megala tanasa chutz leBeis Din. The person has the right not to reveal his claims out of Beis Din. That's the raya. That's the raya. Now it happens to be that over here, in the case that he's quoting, Shimon, who's changing his claim, holding off till he stands in front of court, is the defendant. What? No, but I'm in the case of Baba Basra. Right. But in the case of Baba Basra, we're talking about the defendant. The guy that's changing his claim is the defendant. The guy that, but the Be'er Sheva is learning from there that so too the plaintiff. The plaintiff doesn't have to reveal anything till he stands in front of court. U'gedolim mizeh pasak harosh, and he says there's a rosh in Perek Shvuas Hadayanim, ein adam tzorech levarer tanase, elim ken yiro leBeis Din sheyesh ramos. That's another din. Don't get into now. But even when someone stands in front of Beis Din, there's a big debate in the Rishonim if somebody has to say the whole story from A to Z with all the details, or he could just say something general, and only if Beis Din feels that they need more details, they'll demand more details. I don't want to get into this sugya, because this is a sugya that when you're standing in front of court, how much do you have to reveal, And some Rishonim say you got to spill all the beans. Others say no, you can say a general claim, and Beis Din will only... what's the word?
Cherry pick.
No, that's not the word. They'll whatever. Beis Din will only investigate, ask further questions if they deem it necessary, and that's when you're standing in front of court. So says the Be'er Sheva, imagine before you come to court, you don't have to spill any beans. That's what the Be'er Sheva says. Says the Shach ve'ein dvarav nechonim be'einai. With all due respect, I don't think it's correct. He adds the words be'einai. He could have just said, I think is wrong. He says be'einai, in my eyes, right? Exactly. He didn't have to say the words be'einai. Out of respect, what? Yeah, exactly. And this is nothing. Be'einai is almost like I don't understand, Anyhow.
This is not Malchamas Hashem.
Yeah, no. The Shach was a man of peace. Yeah. Anyhow, but let's continue. Deloy domi leperich cheskes abatim daf 31a. Hasam, what was the Gemara there? Hey chodishtoi mili yibroi. So the Shach says, you know what the difference is? In the case in Baba Basra, when Reuven comes back to town and says, "Oh, Shimon's in my house. Oh, I need to go to court," right? Then the court case is in a month from now. And Shimon says, "What are you talking about?" And Shimon throws out some claim which he says different when he comes to court. When they were speaking outside, Veloy Ton, and Shimon didn't say his real claim. Va'asi leBeis Din, but only when it comes to court v'ton. So he paskin chayz v'ton, he can reclaim. My time and why? Because Ovid inish deloy megala tanasa elebeidina. Because people, the norm is not to reveal your claim unless in front of court. Koloimer, what that means is umatzi hanit veloymar. The defendant can say loy ratzisi legalas tanasi b'fanecha ad ladin. The Shach says that Gemara in Baba Basra is talking about the defendant. When Reuven comes to town, Shimon, you're in my house. Get out of my house. Shimon's like, I'm here already a couple years. And Shimon, let's say the claim Shimon says is that it was never yours. It was never yours. You lived here, but it was never really yours, right? But when they come to court, Shimon has a different claim. He says, I bought it from you. A completely different claim. So says the Shach, there I understand. Because maybe Shimon, he's going to hold off his true claim till in front of Beis Din, because he doesn't want the other guy to be forewarned of what's going to happen, because he doesn't want the other guy to come up with false evidence. Right? But says the Shach, here we're talking about when a defendant gets a knock on his door and Beis Din says, Yankel is suing you in court. What for? We can't tell you. Say the Shach, that's nonsense. Of course you could find out why you're being sued. He said, the nitva can say, I didn't want to reveal my claim until we stood in court. The case of the Rosh, that even when you're in front of court, you don't have to spill all the beans. It's also the defendant there. And kiven shetoyim shepar v'kai gavna ein soch levarech paroi ubama paroi. The Rosh is talking about, Reuven says, Shimon, you owe me $1,000. And Shimon says, I paid you. And the Rosh is saying, the Rosh holds, that's enough for Shimon. Beis Din doesn't have to know that, if Reuven doesn't have any evidence, they don't have to squeeze out from Shimon all the details, unless they think that Shimon's a swindler. Aval hacha, but here, when the plaintiff is suing and not revealing why he's suing, of course he has to. Vadai motzi ha-nitva loymer, the nitva can say, Hagedli mitchila, tell me first, martitz lodin in me, what this is all about. Oh, now why? So the Shach gives a reason. It's not so the defendant can prepare. It's so the defendant can choose whether it's worth it to go to court b'chlal. Ki ulai, perhaps, acharei she'edet v'yizech, if I know what it's about, ese kirtzoincha, I will, if it's only a couple $100, maybe I'll just pay it. V'loi avi imchal is dying klal, will avoid the Beis Din. V'chol's man she'en roitze legalos, and if Reuven does not want to reveal his claim, Shimon does not have to go to court. According to the Shach, if Shimon gets a knock on his door and it's a shliach of Beis Din that says Yankel is suing you, and Shimon says thank you for telling me who, but what's it about? And the shliach says I don't know. Shimon could say have a nice day. He could slam the door and say when you find out, come back. According to the Be'er Sheva, he'll be put in Cherem. Major debate. Now the truth is, even the Shach holds Shimon only has the right to find out what the claim is about. Shimon definitely has no right to find out the details of the claim. Shimon could just ask, why is he taking me to court? Is it about the house? Is it about, is it about the car? What's it about? But Shimon definitely doesn't have the right to find out more details. It's only the general gist of the matter. And the truth is, actually, I've seen a number of people quote the Shach, and for some reason, it seems to be a misunderstanding. People think that the Be'er Sheva proved his din from Baba Basra. The Gemara there says that whatever you say out of court is, you can come back in court and say the real thing. You can hakatrainik outside of court. And many understood the Shach's issue with that was, that's only as far as the details of the case. But the general case you do have to reveal. But the truth, if you look at the Shach, his issue with the Baba Basra was much more than that. The Baba Basra was talking about the defendant, not the plaintiff. The defendant can hack a China completely. But for a plaintiff to summon a defendant to din, he needs to give the general gist of the case. Anyhow, but Al Kaponim, what we have over here is a clear debate. The Be'er Sheva says that the defendant has no right to know the gist of the case. The Shach says, boy, does he. The gist of the case, taka, not the details, but the general, fine. So we have a debate. So what do we do with this debate? So look in number 5, the Chacham Tzvi. Number 5, on the left-hand side, the Chacham Tzvi, the Tzvi Ashkenazi, one of the greatest poskim in his time. He was born in 1656, passes away 1718. So like the generation before the Baal Shem Tov. And the Chacham Tzvi, this is actually his last tshuva. He was. His name was Tzvi Ashkenazi, but he was a rav for the Sfardim. Right, he traveled around a lot. Unfortunately, wherever he was, he got a bit head-to-head with the Balabatim, and he was in many, many places. He was the father of Yaakov Emden, so you can imagine he was a bit of a fighter. Anyhow, the Chacham Tzvi was dealing with a similar story, that, one part of the community was summoning another part of the community without telling him what the summons was about. So look at number 5. Says the Chacham Tzvi, Dover zeh mefurish b'shach simin yud aleph. It's a clear shach. Shebesefer Be'er Sheva mazakes ateveh. The Be'er Sheva says that the Teveh doesn't have to reveal nothing, but Harav Balashach Poisik, the Shach says no. Hadinim imanitve, that the defendant has the right to demand. Says the Chacham Tzvi, who's right? V'divrei ha-Be'er Sheva bazeh b'teilin hein. The Be'er Sheva's words are bottled, irrelevant. De'ein ze inyan legilui tarnasa. Because the rayas the Be'er Sheva brings has nothing to do, the Gilui Tarnasa that the Be'er Sheva is drawing his proofs from is revealing the details of your claim. But the defendant definitely has the right to know what in the world's going on. Why are we going to court? Adar Rabbi says, Faked Yeshrai Lehepach, have a proof the other way. Midar Minon Bam, we have a rule. Atruche Beidina Bichti Loi Matruchinon. We don't harass Bezdin to sit on a case which won't be resolved, or if the resolution of Bezdin won't have any effect. Litigants can't go to a court, shouldn't go to a court if it's not going to be purposeful. So says the Chacham Tzvi, just like the Shach, Shema kishe yishma anitva ma'atvei mavakish. If the nitva, the defendant, hears what this is about, maybe you malim mishalasa, you might just concede instead of going to court, so you could avoid the trouble of the court. So he's saying the same logic as the Shach, but he's proving it from this. The Shach didn't mention it for the sake of the judges. The Shach just said, listen, if you can avoid the court, it's almost the Shach seemed to learn it's for the favor of the defendant. He deserves to know what it's about, so he can choose if he wants to go to court or if he wants to settle it out of court. The Chacham Tzvi is bringing another idea, that we never harass, the Bezdin never have to exert themselves if it's not necessary. And
to say what's necessary.
well, no, but he's saying it's 50. It's possible he might concede.
So one possible situation.
No, it's not one possible. It's very. It's
There's
you know what?
100 other reasons
It's
why
50.
it's better to have what the
Okay,
other side
granted,
is.
granted.
So they're giving one possible
Okay.
way for it to be a waste of time. So for that,
Right,
we're going to get the whole thing, and that's not a slug up.
Hold on, wait, hold on. No. The way the Chacham Tzvi is looking at this, like you have a debate between the Be'er Sheva and the Shach. Says the Chacham Tzvi, each of them have the Be'er Sheva's proofs. The Shach already did away with. And the Shach has a good svara for the sake of the plaintiff, for the sake of the defendant. Maybe he'll want to sort it outside of court. Said the Chacham Tzvi, let me throw another proof into the mix. We have a general rule that we don't get Bezdin to sit on a matter if it's not necessary. And over here, there's high chances that if the nitva hears what it's all about.
You're saying that you can explain Be'er Sheva's reasoning is what Be'er Sheva says. Be'er Sheva doesn't say that. He just wants to be a riot.
Right.
We're saying about the reaction. The Be'er Sheva doesn't say anything about that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that's my own. That's what. I've seen other people bring it up.
I'm saying, but that's what he's arguing. He says that's a very powerful.
I know.
But
Yeah.
that's not what Be'er Sheva is saying. He's not being right.
He liked the var. He liked it. I love why you.
I can think
That's a
of 100
compliment.
reasons,
yeah.
including
But
that
he's bringing a
Be'er Sheva.
riot. He said the riot is no good.
Yeah, but the rise from a
He's
Gemara.
making his own reason.
They're giving small reasonings
No.
of possible
Right,
situations
and
where
it was
that
on
riot
riot.
wouldn't count. That's one possible situation in a million different scenarios, and they're trying to say the Be'er
No,
Sheva
but this-
is no
this-
good
but
because
hold
I'm
on.
giving you one possible scenario.
You would know much better than I know, but how often do people want to sort things out of court instead of going to court, especially if it's a small?
That's great. Go to court and say I'll sort it out.
Why you don't want to talk about that?
What do you mean?
Going to court. First of all,
You're giving the
it's a day off
defendant the
work.
right
It's a
to
day off
blow
work. Who's gonna take it?
make that decision?
It's first of all, it's
You should together.
embarrassing, pressure,
Don't do
stress,
anything wrong.
heartache, headache,
Don't rip somebody
expenses.
off. Don't be in a machlekes. If you're in a
He
machlekes,
didn't make the
He thinks he's innocent. Maybe.
He's innocent.
How do you know
Go
who's?
to court and say you're innocent.
Yeah.
Go to court and say you're innocent. Moshe Rabbeinu gave them an opportunity to come to court. Go to court and say you're innocent.
Going to court is a last resort. Shut up.
I'm going to say
going to court is a last resort, not a first resort.
What do you mean? Clearly,
we
if
always
this
want
guy had
people to
sue
work
you,
things.
If this guy had to sue you, why can't we assume, like the Beis Sheva, if you want to counter that, why can't you say this
Okay.
guy tried 100 times to get you to pay your fine, still get $100, and you refuse because you don't do the right
No, the
thing.
guy says he has
And
no
you take
idea
it to
why he's
court.
being summoned.
It's expensive
No.
to summon somebody.
The-
The plaintiff wanted to summon them.
The defendant tells the messenger of Bezdin, "Why am I being summoned?"
You're not supposed
Apparently,
to know.
the guy
Beis Sheva
hasn't
says
sent him
you're not supposed to
100
know. I don't want to
messages.
tell you. There's a proof that.
No,
there
but the
is an
case
idea
can't be
you
that
don't have
the-
to say things
No, no,
until
no, no.
court actually happens.
No, but
I don't
no,
want
no,
to
no,
give
no,
you an idea.
no. But if the case is that he's already tried 100 times and he knows what's going on.
Okay, so then come to court. But
No,
the fact,
but
you can't say it's
his
not
claim is he
convenient
doesn't
for
know.
me.
His
I get
claim
to
is he
make
doesn't know.
He claims he doesn't know, but clearly, if it got to the court, it took me 100 times to ask you for my money. Guys don't just run to court. It's expensive to run to court. for the plaintiff.
No. So he knows. So why is he claiming he doesn't know? Just to stall further?
This guy's a Drake up. What do you
Saying
mean?
he
What do you
really
think
knows.
was going into
Saying he
court?
really
I'm
knows.
telling him, he already knows.
What do you think happens? It's my dollars, it's your dollars.
All right,
he already
fine,
knows,
fine,
so he wants
okay.
to make sure. He has 5 claims against him. He doesn't know which one this is. Is this the big ripoff or is this the small ripoff? What do you mean? This is the story of defendants.
but you know,
You
you
go to a
also-
guy, you look up his record, he has 50 lawsuits against
The
him.
funny
I'm gonna
thing is,
tell you what it
I think
It-
your first reaction a half hour ago was that
Absolutely.
he needs to be forewarned to prepare himself.
You have to prepare yourself. You prepare yourself, but if the bottom line is the Bezdin's going to give you a chance to prepare yourself. They don't want you preparing yourself outside of their realm. You'll prepare yourself in the way that we'll tell you to prepare yourself. We'll give you
Well,
time
you
to
said
bring
the
your witnesses.
preliminary claim.
You're
Okay.
actually making his case also, you're making both cases.
Okay, fine, good. It's exactly what we wanted of it. It's exactly what. Okay. Weiter continues the Chachamsi. V'oid, in addition, he goes back to the Raya of the Beis Sheva. Eino inyan klal nidin didan. The Raya is from left field. It doesn't. It's apples and oranges. Again, going back to the Raya from Baba Basra. The Hossam over there, Hainu sheyochol liton bebezin taina shul zoicheba. The case by the house. When Reuven says, "What are you doing in my house?" and outside Bezin, Shimon said ABC, and he saved his real claim till he came to court, that makes sense. Even though he didn't say XYZ earlier while they were outside of court, or afilu he said ABC, a different claim, Ton Chutz LeBezin, if he said the opposite, that makes sense. Because people want to save their real claim for when they're crunched by the court. But to force the defendant to go to Bezdin al beli ma without knowing anything, Allah makes no sense. He says the Be'er Sheva's Shita doesn't make sense. That's what he says. Then he continues. He has a couple more, but then he continues. The next line he says, even if Shokol Rayas Be'er Sheva v'Rayas Tashach, he says, even if the proof of the Be'er Sheva is equal to the proof of the Shach, ein safek shalacha kedivrei hashach. He says, even if both opinions were equally logical, the halacha for sure follows the Shach. Why? Shehu basra, because he is a basra. The rule is in halacha, you follow the later authorities. Why? Because ra divrei Be'er Sheva v'choyle kalem. This is a general rule. It used to be we followed the earlier generations, and ein halacha katalmud b'mkayim harav. You always went like the teacher instead of the student. Until Abaye v'Rava came on the scene. There's a tradition from the Gaonim that once Abaye and Rava came on the scene in the 4th generation of Amoraim, from then on the halacha follows the latter. And the reason is because the latter knows the entire argument of the former and nevertheless argues. Whereas we don't know that the former knew the entire argument of the latter. That's what he's hinting to over here. The Shach saw the whole Be'er Sheva, Chaylik Aleim, and the Chacham Sri first says he doesn't like the Be'er Sheva's opinion. He says even if it's equal to the Shach, the laws of Psak would follow the Shach. Kol shekei v'kavachoyim ataman etfam. Then he says further here, even if it's a Suffolk who's right, you wouldn't have to go to court. If there's a suffix, if you have to go to court or not, you don't have to go. Even if it's an equal debate, Bezdin can't force you to come if it's 50-50 if you have to come or not. This is clear to anyone that ever smelled the smell of Torah. Reb Pinchas Hirschsprung from Montreal, when he would faher people on smicha, he used to ask interesting, cute types of questions. And he once asked somebody who told me this. He says, "Where does it say that Torah smells? That Torah schmeckt. Wie steht das Torah schmeckt? Torah smells." So the guy remembered. It's a marshal who says about how much you weigh between flesh and milk and flesh. The marshal there says that anyone that has a smell of Torah, would know what the halacha is. So Pinchas Heshbon says, you see? That's a proof that Torah has a smell. Anyhow, the Chacham Tzvi says, anyone that ever smelled a bit of Torah would know that this is the case. The Be'er Sheva's arguments are weak. Secondly, even if it's equal, you follow the latter, which is the Shach. The Shach passes away in the 1660s. It's not that much later, but it's a couple decades after the Be'er Sheva. It's enough to be Basra. Thirdly, even if it's mamish, if it's a suffix, if you have to go to court, you don't go to court. That's the Bach. I'm sorry, the Chacham Tzvi. Look at number 6 on the right, the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan was much later. He passes away in the early 1900s, but he was a generation before the Mishnah Brura. I heard from many people that before the war in Europe, the Aruch HaShulchan was much more popular than the Mishnah Brura. And even here, by the Moshe Feinstein, by some of the older Rabbonim, the Aruch HaShulchan's words actually carried more weight than the Mishnah Brura. But now it's completely the opposite. Over the last couple decades, it's mamish changed. Now the Aruch HaShulchan is just, it's mamish. Even by the Litvishers, has become on the side. The Mishnah Brura has become much more central. But what?
It's a good collection.
Yeah, it's gewaltig. Also, the Mishnah Brura is only on Orach Chaim. The Aruch HaShulchan has the whole thing. But he says, number 6, Yachol HaNitva Loimer LaTeveya. The nitva, the claimee, the defendant can demand from the plaintiff, koydem, before we go to court, Haggily, tell me why you're taking me to court. And if the teveya says, I'm not going to reveal the teviya until we're in court, the nitva could say, I'm not going until you tell me. And he gives the same logic as the Shach. Well, he's quoting the Shach. He says, because maybe if I hear what it's about, then I'll pacify you, chutz lebezin. We'll settle it out of court. So he paskins like the Shach. Look in number 7, the Nesivus HaMishpat, one of the great poskim 200 years ago. He quotes the Shach, not the Beresh. Look at number 7. Kosav HaShach, the Shach writes, Yochol HaNitva Loimar, the nitva, the claimee, can say, I'm not going to judge with you until you tell me first what this is about. And the plaintiff cannot say, I'm going to wait till we go to court. So the Nesivus, the Aruch HaShulchan, the Chacham Tzvi, all paskin like the Shach. Look at number 8, the Ktseis HaChoshen, who's the Arya Leib Heller, Hakoyen. In the times of the Alter Rebbe, he says, Ayin Shach, who quotes from the Be'er Sheva, B'mishra is down Chaveroi. Reuven wants to take Shimon to court, and Shimon says, tell me what it's about. Maybe I'll be moida before we go, and I'll pay it early. And the Be'er Sheva says Reuven doesn't have to reveal anything. And B'shach Choylek. So the Ktseis HaChoshen quotes both opinions. It's actually very rare. He just quotes both opinions and he says nothing. Very rare for him to do that. I don't know exactly what he wants. The Nesivus only quotes the Shach. So I get. No, the Nesivus does the same. The Nesivus only quotes the Shach. So he's passing like the Shach. I got it. But what's the Ktseis HaChoshen doing quoting both? Just to tell you it's a debate.
Yeah, and he's letting you know.
If you're learning the Ktseis HaChoshen, you probably already saw the Shach. You probably know it already. I'm not sure what he wants, but it sounds like that is not. To me, what the Ktseis HaChoshen seems to be saying is like the way the Chacham Tzvi finishes. It remains a debate. There's two ways over here, and we're going to see.
Chacham Tzvi closes out the debate.
No, but he says the Chacham
There was
Tzvi.
the debate, and I'll give you 3 reasons why it's not like the Be'er Sheva.
Two of the reasons is that the Shach and the Be'er Sheva are equal. Two of the things of the Chacham Tzvi was they're equal. One was they're equal, but you follow the ladder because of Basra.
He doesn't say it's
and
equal.
He does. He said even if they're
He
shokol.
says it's ladder. First he's talking about theory, and then he brings in a trump card that you never see. Oh, it's
Okay,
ladder. I'm closing out the debate.
All right, fine. Fine. Weiter. I'll put him like this. So who taka goes like the Be'er Sheva? There's a number of people. The Shavus Yankov, Rabbi Yankov Reisher, Rabbi Yankov Reisher was one of the greatest poskim. He passed away 300 years ago. So also like the generation before the Baal Shem Tov. You don't like him because he questioned the status of Koyanim. The Shvus Yankov had the story where there was a guy, a Koyan, who married a woman who had been widowed twice, and later they found out that after her first husband died, she had to do chalitza, but the story went under the rug. And now he's a Kohen married to a woman who had chalitza, which is rabbinically prohibited. And the Shvus Yankov said, well, it's only rabbinic prohibition, and there's a suffix here, because who said he's a Kohen? So you don't like the Shvus Yankov, but I'll tell you. But the Shvus Yankov did say, though, we can't force him to divorce, but he should divorce, because what about his kids? He's hurting his kids. Why would he do that to his kids?
You said the same thing a month ago.
Yeah, and that's, I'm just quoting it again. Because we said we have to harass. We have to harass. Anyhow, the Shvus Yankov paskins like the Be'er Sheva, which is very important. The Shvus Yankov is his shittas carry a lot of it. He paskins like the Be'er Sheva. And another person is the Be'er Asek. The Be'er Asek, his name was Reb Shabsi Be'er. He lived a couple hundred years ago. We know very little about him, except the following. The first time I came across the Be'er Asek was a number of years ago. There's a major controversy about if the Reb Menachem Azariah of Pano, the great Kabbalist, did he have a beard or not? Did he have a beard? The Chassam Sofer believes he didn't have a beard. It's a very interesting discussion. In the Sefer Be'er Asek, written over 300 years ago, he writes there that the Rameh Mipanu used to cut his beard with scissors, and he writes it's because Kabbalistically you don't need to have a beard outside Eretz Yisrael. That's what the Be'er Asek says. That's what he says. He's not the only one who says that svara. Maybe we'll have a shir one time. The Be'er Asek says Kabbalistically, outside Eretz Yisrael you don't need a beard, and the biggest proof is Menachem Azariah of Pano, one of the greatest Kabbalists. The Yankov Emden says he's the king of Kabbalah, HaMoshel b'Chochmas HaKabbalah, and he there's a record that he cut his beard. That's what the Be'er Asek says. Comes Rabbi Yosef Irgaz. Rabbi Yosef Irgaz was a great Kabbalist in Italy. He passes away in the year 1730. He wrote a sefer called Shomer Emunim, a very important work. In fact, when the Misnagdim answered all the works of Kabbalah, in the early days of the Misnagdim, they made a big thing about not learning works of Kabbalah. They even forbade learning Reishis Chachma, which is Mamash, but they allowed the Shomer Emunim. The Shomer Emunim was like so perfect and so safe that the Misnagdim allowed it to be learned. The Shomer Emunim, Rabbi Yosef Irgaz, is actually very important to us for a specific reason. He's probably the greatest Kabbalist to push the idea of Tzimtzum Lav Kipshutai. Just for 30 seconds, we know that Arizal speaks that the Eibishter was Metzamtzum, he contracted himself to make way for worlds, right? And there shouldn't be an overload of godliness shining into the world. And the question is, does Arizal mean a concealment or mamash, a removal of the light? And two of the greatest Kabbalists fought it out. Emmanuel Chai Riki, who authored the Mishnas Chassidim, who was the same age as Rabbi Yosef Irgaz, they're about 3 years apart. Rabbi Emmanuel Chai Riki in the Mishnas Chassidim, who was a major Kabbalist. In fact, I once saw that the Alter Rebbe once said that, the Mishnas Chassidim is the most authentic record of the Arizal's teachings that we have. And the Mishnas Chassidim believed that the Tzimtzum is literal. The Eibishter actually removed himself. Yet Tzimtzum Kipshutai, what? The Alter Rebbe disagrees, it's true. And before the Alter Rebbe disagreed, Rabbi Yosef Irgaz, he disagreed with the Mishnas Chassidim, and he said, no, the Tzimtzum is not literal, it's only a concealment, and he became very famous for that. But the Shomer Emunim, Rabbi Yosef Irgaz, this big Kabbalist in Italy, was also a Rav, and he wrote a sefer called Divrei Yosef. And he has a tshuva about the beard of the Rameh Mipanu. It's actually a wondrous tshuva to read, Siman Chaf Hei. It's easy reading, it's very intriguing. And he writes there that when I saw in the Sefer Be'er Asek that the Rameh Mipanu didn't have a beard, I said, it can't be. The greatest Kabbalist, it can't be. So Rabbi Yosef Irger said, I asked my teacher, Reb Baruch Kohen, the Maharbach, Reb Baruch Kohen, one of the greatest authorities in Italy, over 300 years ago, 350 years ago. And I asked him, you heard about this tradition that Ameh had no beard? And my teacher told me, what? I saw a painting that Ameh Mepano. He has a full beard. He has a full beard. More than that, Rabbi Yosef Irger says, I heard from my teacher, the Baruch Kohen, you can't trust the Sefer Be'er Esek, because many of his tshuvas have been ripped apart by the great Rabbonim of today. So Rabbi Yosef Irger says the whole Sefer is, and he says more than that, he says the Be'er Esek wasn't a Kabbalist, so who gives him the right to say that Kabbalistically you don't need a beard outside Eretz Yisrael? If you're not a Kabbalist and you don't know, what gives you the right to say such an outlandish statement? But he says, I heard from my teacher that the whole Be'er Esek, the whole Sefer is questionable. So it's just that was the first time I came across the Sefer. But it comes up again. The Be'er Esek notably paskins like the Be'er Sheva over here. So you have the Be'er Esek, the Shvus Yanka following the Be'er Sheva, that Reuven doesn't have to reveal nothing. Only has to reveal his identity, not the claim. Fine. But you have the Chacham Tzvi, the Aruch HaShulchan, the Nesivos, the Shach, who all disagree. Look in number 8 for a second. At the bottom, there's Hagoyis Imrei Baruch. The Hagoyis Imrei Baruch, and we're going to finish just a moment. Reb Baruch Tu'umim Frankel. He was in the times of the Alter Rebbe and Mittler Rebbe, a great Torah genius. He was the father-in-law of Reb Chaim Tzanzer. Actually,
His last name, Frank.
so yeah, related.
Great grandpa.
That's it.
Great, 10 generations to wait till the last one to get your
Look what he says at the bottom. He says, Nichtev b'tzidios. These are, he's known as the Baruch Tam. But he wrote notes on Shulchan Aruch called Imrei Baruch. He says, look at the bottom, Nun Beis Nichtev b'tzidios, written on the side of his manuscript. Yu'uyin, look at Moed Katan Daf Tezayin. Look at number 1. He says, look at number 1. Atu plan yechulu. Look in the Chidushay Ritva Sham. Mashma from the Ritva to Einot Tzarech Leidiyat Hanasai. It's mashma from the Ritva that the Be'er Sheva is right. Wow, what's he talking about? We'll see in a second. Then he says, look in the Urim, which is Yonis and Eibeshitz and Simon Yud Gimel. What's he talking about? He's talking about like this. There's a Ritva that I didn't get on the page, but the Ritva says, why, in number 1, why Taka does the defendant get the right to know who the plaintiff is? Why do we reveal the identity? So the Ritva says two reasons. One reason is because if he knows the identity of the plaintiff, he'll know what it's about, and maybe they'll sort it out outside court. Number 2, so he should be able to prepare himself. He shouldn't come into court, completely vulnerable and raw, not knowing anything. The Ritva gives 2 reasons. Again, one reason, the preparing himself, and the other reason is maybe they'll sort it outside court. Now that logic of sorting outside court, we saw in the Chacham Tzvi, we saw in the Shach, but the Shach and the Chacham Tzvi are quoting it to give the defendant the right to know what the claim's about. The Ritva only says it as far as the defendant knowing who the name of the plaintiff. That's what the Ritva says. So comes with Baruch Tam and says, the Imrei Baruch, and says, if you look at the Ritva, it's mashma, that the only credit we give to the defendant is to know who's claiming, not what the claim is. That's a big deal. Because here we have a big debate between the Achronim. And according to the Imrei Baruch, you have a Ritva that sides with the Be'er Sheva. That really kind of sets everything the other way. Comes the Chidah in his Sefer Birkei Yosef. The Birkei Yosef, he says that, he quotes the Ritva. And he says, Fakert, he thinks the Ritva actually is a proof for the Shach. Because the Ritva gives the same logic as the Shach. Let's let the person know who's claiming in order they could work it out outside court. Why didn't the Ritva go further to say, like the Shach, you could even know what it is? Because the Gemara never said that. The Gemara, number 1, is learning from our Parsha, where Moshe says just who the plaintiff is going to be. So the Ritva is just explaining the Gemara. But what was the reason of the entitlement that the defendant has? So he could work it out outside court. So then, once you have the reason, it makes sense the Ritva will agree to the Shach. That usually, if you know who's claiming, you know what it's about.
Of course.
But if it happens to be that even once you know who it is, you don't know what the claim is about, the same logic will dictate that you have the right to find out what the claim is. So it's interesting, you have a debate between the Imrei Baruch and the Chidah, if the Ritva is a riot to the Be'er Sheva or a riot to the Shach. The Imrei Baruch says the fact that the Ritva only allows you to know the identity means you can't know what the claim's about. The Shach says Fakert. The Chidah says Fakert, it fits with the Shach. The Gemara says you know who it is, so the Ritva didn't go any further. But the logic is so maybe you'll work it out outside court. But if for some reason knowing the guy's name isn't enough, then you have the right to know. But he says over here, look in the Udim Siman Yud Gimel, look at the B'yonis and Eibeshitz. Comes the B'yonis and Eibeshitz, and the B'yonis and Eibeshitz says, he has a third opinion. You could know who's claiming, and you could know how much the claim is. But you can't know, what avenue the claim is coming to you from. You can know how much it's about. 1,000, 1,000,000, 10 million, whatever, but that's it, only the amount. He says, what's the logic? He says, because if it's a small amount, maybe it's not even worth to go to court. Right? Maybe it's not. Maybe you'd rather just pay the couple $100 but if it's talking millions of dollars, you'll go to court. So the B'yonis and Eibush says he paskins like the Be'er Sheva, that the plaintiff has the right to conceal what it's about, but the defendant has the right to know the amount. So it remains an interesting debate. You have the Be'er Sheva, you have the Be'er Asik, you have the Shvus Yankiv, you have the Imrei Baruch saying the Ritva holds that way, saying that the Reuven can be tight-lipped till he comes to court. Rabbi Yonis and Eibeshitz is similar, just Reuven just has to reveal how much it's about. And then you have all the others who believe that no, like the Shach, Shimon has the right to know exactly, not the details of the claim, but the general claim, exactly what's going on here. I'll just end with this. In the Sefer Be'er Asik, he says, wait a second, the Be'er Asik holds like the Be'er Sheva. I'll just tell you one of his proofs. He says, I'll prove to you the Be'er Sheva is right, that Shimon does not have the right to find out what the claim is. Because in number one, the Gemara in Moed Katan from this week's parish is quoting all the different things when it comes to summoning someone to din. And the Gemara only said you could find out the person. The name. Right. Why didn't the Gemara itself go further?
Amen.
The Chidah says the Ritva didn't go further because it's only explaining the Gemara. Fine, it's not a kash on the Ritva, but the Gemara.
We don't follow this.
But Taka, why didn't the Gemara go further?
He says Kainim are full legit.
Why didn't the Gemara go further? So the truth is, but wait a second.
Everybody knows about it.
The truth, when Moshe said this pasuk, did Moshe tell them what it's about? He didn't have to, right? It was obvious. That's the
point. That's
So you can't. So you can't prove either way. So you can't prove either way. So I'll just tell you if you look in number 8 in the bottom, Rabbi Kiva Eger says, look in the tshuva of the Zichron Yosef, from Yosef Steinhardt. Yosef Steinhardt deals with this raya of the Be'er Asik, and he says the following. And this is important. He says, when the Bezdin summons Shimon to appear, from the outset they have to tell Shimon who the plaintiff is.
For sure.
They only have to tell Shimon what it's about if Shimon demands. It's a different. The Zichron Yosef paskins like the Chacham Tzvi and the Shach. Shimon has the right to, but he has to ask for it. He has to ask for it. So therefore he says about number 1, you know why the Gemara here is talking about what the Bezdin has to do l'chatchila. L'chatchila, they have to reveal to Shimon who's the plaintiff. The Gemara is not, but if Shimon would ask, the Gemara is not talking about. The Gemara is talking about what Bezdin has to do already from the get-go, from the outset, l'chatchila. And that's why the Gemara didn't get into what exactly the claim is about, because Shimon only gets that if he asks for it. Shimon, and the truth is the Chidah paskins the same way as well. So even those that paskin like the Shach and the Chacham Tzvi, there's still a difference about knowing the person versus knowing the amount. The person you get right away. Not the amount, but the actual claim. The general claim. The person you get right away. The claim, you have the right to demand, and if you demand, you have the right to know. Anyhow, we'll end over here.
Koil Mamish, how does Bezdin do it today?
Settle outside the court. Yeah, no problem.
It's a beautiful invitation. It says
Does it say those? It says the claim or it just says who's
Oh,
called?
the Maisa? No, the Maisa we paskin like the Shach and the Chacham Suri. Because the Nesivos, the Aruch HaShulchan, most paskin that way. It says generally what the claims are, but the truth is, I don't know.
I thought it was just the person.
Yeah, but no. The truth is no, because according to the Zichron Yosef and the Chador, he has to ask. Right.
Then he gets his information.
It has a picture of the.
So maybe Taka doesn't until he asks.
I
What?
would say it has a picture of Mampana. It says this. My
guy there, you gotta pay if you do that.
Right. And there's a beard.
Yeah.
Some say the.
Let me ask you.
So some says